Welcome to the Microdosing for Healing podcast. I'm your host, Casey Garrett, and together we'll be discovering and learning from inspiring voices of healers, medicine keepers, and visionaries. Every episode, we'll explore the world of health, vibrant wellness, and natural medicine for a new era of human society. Welcome to today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for being with us. Today, we have an extra treat because we are joined by Live Free Laura D, aka Laura Dawn, and also her insect friends. Laura, as you will see, lives in a jungle in Costa Rica, and so we have lots of animal friends that are going to be with us during our episode today. So thank you for being here. I'm really excited to introduce all of you to Laura Dawn. She is the host of the Psychedelic Leadership Podcast, a keynote speaker, mentor, teacher, retreat facilitator, and for over 20 years, Laura has dedicated her life to translating altered states into amplified impact, creating a body of work and in-depth curriculum to support the healing and awakening of humanity that she teaches through her signature online programs. Laura holds a Master of Science specializing in creativity and change, leadership, and is at the forefront of exploring the intersection between sacred plant medicines and creative cognition, supporting visionary thought leaders who want to amplify a message and birth their legacy work in service to the earth. You can connect with Laura Dawn on Instagram at LiveFreeLauraD, where she shares her open-air lifestyle in Costa Rica, as well as on her website, lauradawn.co, where you can access her for free music playlist for psychedelic journeys and beyond. Welcome, Laura. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to actually start Monday morning with you with a cup of tea and just drop in and catch up and see how you're doing too. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So I'd love to start with, present day, people who've met you recently see you in this beautiful lifestyle. You're in love. You live in this magical place. And it belies in a lot of ways, a lot of the adversity and big leaps that you have had to make in life to get to this place today. So I would love for you to back up a little bit and share with people who may just be meeting you for the first time, kind of a little bit of your experience through life and how the adversity and big leaps you've gone through have informed where you are today.
Oh, goodness. That's such a great opening question. And my mind immediately goes to how far back do we want to go? I mean, no one can grow up in Western culture and be unscathed, no matter how, good your parents are and how well they tried, And so, maybe I'll just go back to 2018 and weave in some of the earlier sort of limiting beliefs that I struggled with in my life. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I left home at a very young age and I lived out of a backpack for many years. So I guess I'll start a little bit before 2018. This was about 20 years ago when I was struggling with addiction and depression. And I hit a real fundamental rock bottom moment in my life. I was struggling with disordered eating. I was sort of on the fast track to quote unquote success, but someone else's definition of success. I was in university studying business, and also I was completing a degree in finance. And that was sort of healing some of my wounds around my father and some of his issues with gambling. And he was also a serial entrepreneur. And I grew up in a household that went through financial high highs and low lows, more low lows than high highs, but it was really up and down. And then I was really just feeling so disconnected in my life, struggling with various addictions. And also, like I said, a disordered relationship to food and to my body. And I grew up very athletic. And I also grew up with the belief that I wasn't creative and I wasn't smart. So my athletic capability was going to get me far in life. But then I actually quit playing sports at a certain age when my whole upbringing, I was thinking, I'm going to go to the Olympics. That was my track. And that didn't happen for me. And I went through a pretty big identity crisis in my late teens. And it led to, just reaching for a lot of substances to cover over the pain of figuring out who I was. And I hit a rock bottom moment. I wrote about this in my first published book that I wrote about addiction called Unhooked. And I was on the bathroom floor and I was sobbing, and I had my first sort of out of body experience where I heard this voice saying, this doesn't have to be your life. You can actually choose whatever life you want. And that following month, I gave everything away that I owned. I packed a backpack and I left, and I never went back. And I still feel like I'm on a journey. And in the beginning years, I was sort of simultaneously running away from myself and towards myself at the same time. Running away from this version of myself and running towards like, who am I? What am I really capable of? And over those years, I worked with different psychedelics. So it's been over 25 years that I've been journeying with these medicines, and they've been a huge ally in my own journey of healing and transformation. And over the years, healing my relationship to addiction, it was like being in a small, dark room. When you struggle with addiction and depression, it's kind of like being in a dark room, and it's just kind of going round and round with ruminative thinking, round and round with self. And over the years, and it took a lot of work to unwind those patterns, heal those patterns. It wasn't just like one time LSD trip healed everything, although there were those really big, significant journeys that offered these really big turning points. But it was a lot of effort over the years of establishing new patterns, expanding what I believed is possible. And I remember going through the process of really stepping out of that small, dark room and thinking, wow, like now what do I do with my life? I'm free from the hook that was all I was thinking about was this handful of thoughts. And now I have all this space to create. And at that time, I was building my first online brand that I rarely talk about. I built it was a passion project that I actually started with my mom that was all about focused on spreading positivity. This was like one of those endeavors that you don't do it for the money. We were just so excited about it. It was right when Facebook came out. And I ended up growing that to 1.5 million followers, over 1.5 million followers on Facebook. And I sold that to build a volcanic hot spring retreat center in Hawaii. And I worked so hard to build this place with my ex-partner, and we just blood, sweat, and tears. That land really shaped me, and so many miracles aligned for that to happen. Because right before I had sold that brand, we were just drowning in back-breaking work on the land. It was just super, super hard. And this miracle happened, and it allowed us to bring this vision to fruition. And we had beautiful ceremonies on that land. And one ceremony, I had a vision that pretty much it was like the vision of my worst nightmares, going through divorce, experiencing a volcanic eruption. Basically, I had this moment of like, what if I lost everything? Who would I be? And and it was just so anxiety provoking in that moment. I was just like, oh my God, push the vision away. Like, no, I don't want to even entertain that thought. And it was many, many years of working with medicine in a way that I feel like they're offering us a training to learn how to move through adversity. If you think about every ceremony, it's sort of like you go through your own death rebirth process where you're cultivating the resilience of staying with it, of sitting in your center, even when it gets hard, because there's no room to run or you can't bolt when it's, difficult. So you're really training yourself to sit with discomfort. And all of those years, I feel like prepared me for the 2018 volcanic eruption, where literally my worst fears came true, like sequentially. It was so wild because the last ceremony on our land, I walked in and I was crying, and I said to my ex-partner, I feel like this is going to be the last ceremony we ever have on this land. And people were like, you are crazy. And that next month we had, actually the night before the earthquake started happening, I had a solo medicine journey. And that night, and it only happens once in a while, but that night it was like the first time I really offered myself up to spirit and surrendered in a different way than I'd ever surrendered before, where I was like, okay, what is my life for? How can I be of service to the healing and awakening of humanity? What do I need to do? And that night I picked up my guitar and I was given a full song that was trust in the great unknown, trust that the highest will unfold. And the next morning, I woke up to thousands of earthquakes. Literally, the tectonic plates under the earth were shifting. And that week was just one of the most biggest portals of initiation of my life. We were wearing gas masks because these big, craters were opening. We heard that the road about a mile above our land cracked open and lava was starting to flow. And so we had to start evacuating with gas masks and all of these gas emissions in the air. And it was like being in a post-apocalyptic reality where we were shoving things into bins and just trying to get things out because there's only one road in and out of that, of where we lived. And that road ended up getting covered by lava. And the whole time that I was in this place that was totally like a 2-week long altered state of consciousness, all I had were those lines from the song, trust in the great unknown, trust that the highest will unfold. And, it was such a special land. We had a hot spring that flowed at 111 degrees there. And it was just such an aligned chapter of my life. Imagining that anything more incredible could happen after such a devastating experience was just so unfathomable. And we had a woman at our last retreat contact us and say, I was such in a state of trauma. I was so disoriented. I could barely talk. A woman contacted us and say, I have friends in Costa Rica. You don't know them, but just don't even think about it. Just get on a plane and go stay with them. And we did. We just got on a plane and we landed in Costa Rica in this magical place. And this incredible couple took care of us. And I was literally not forming full sentences for 2 weeks. And we stayed in Costa Rica and we watched every day the lava skirt just around our land. For months, we watched and we prayed that we weren't going to lose everything. And it was the hardest experience of my life. And someone made us an offer during that time while lava was still flowing to buy our land for a very discounted price. And we were just in such a state of fear and trauma and so shooken from the experience. We ended up taking that agreement and selling it because even going back to be there was so unfathomable to me at that point. And through that whole experience, and during the eruption, there was a 7.0 earthquake that shattered like so much of my life. All of my belongings were like devastated through that experience. And so it wasn't just the eruption, it was also the massive earthquakes that we went through. And my marriage just didn't survive that experience. We didn't make it through the other side of that. And so it catapulted me into multi-years of being in one long dark night of the soul, for multiple years. And I have learned so much through that experience and medicines, and not just medicines. Also, I would say Buddhist philosophy, Tibetan Buddhism was like, Pema Chodron's book, When Things Fall Apart, was like my survival manual for that time. And I've been studying Pema's work for 20 years. And I would say that combined with the medicine work really prepared me for navigating that time of upheaval. And in so many ways, I feel like that's a micro story of the macro time of change that we're living through. And I saw it play out over and over again. Like, wow, we are being trained to learn how to foster what I call transilience, transformation, resilience, so that we can be strong enough to help support other people through these times of change. Because from economy to prophecy, things are changing right now. And we could say that things are always changing, but we are also seeing tectonic shifts in a way that are unprecedented and that we haven't ever seen. And through that experience, and I'll wrap it up so that we can, move on to other topics. But through that experience, I really learned that cocoon, when you go into the darkness, that cocoon of metamorphosis, that the darkness is actually our greatest ally. And that if we can train ourselves how to stay calm in the liminal space where there is no ground to stand on. There's nothing to hold on to. The concrete, like, this is my life. This is my identity. This is where I live. This is my home. This is my partner. This is my career path. When all of that just goes poof, how do you stay centered without totally losing your shit and freaking out, but actually hold the vision of what you want to create next after you go through, of course, the grieving of letting go. And I feel like I received, a 3-year long PhD in grief and what it means to create, and how grief and creativity and grief and love are just the essence of the same thing, and how to open to that. And what that means to actually, when we open to that, we're stepping into wholehearted living and we're leaning into life completely, which I feel like is the ingredients for leading through these times of change.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. That leads perfectly my first question for you, which is the concept of transilience. So I have so many people, more than ever. I've worked with people almost 30 years now, and never before have I seen so many people stepping into healing work. And they're like, I am ready for a plot twist. Like, it's undeniable that things are conspiring to make me so uncomfortable with my reality and my status quo life. I can't conceive another 10, 20, 30 years of this. And I don't know how to take the steps. They don't think they have the courage necessarily to leave behind their conditioned life, their life with these identities. So it's one thing to have life pulled out from under you, right? By a volcano or a pandemic or extreme loss and grief. But it's another thing to knowingly step into a brand new life. It takes a lot of courage and bravery. So can you speak to, I'd love for you to talk more about what transilience is, what it means to you, and how can people find that courage within themselves to take those leaps into the unknown when it's not forced upon them?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So transilience is such an interesting concept. It sounds like resilience, right? We know, we're so familiar with this body of work that has emerged around like the most essential skill sets for our time. But when I studied resilience, that word just didn't fully encapsulate what I was trying to get at, because re is about going back. Zilliance comes from the root word salir, to leap, right? And so trans means to move beyond. And the word trans, so to move beyond, to take the leap, and the word transilience encapsulates moving forward. There is no going back. There's no adjusting backwards, especially post-pandemic. We've entered the age of artificial intelligence. We've moved into the fourth industrial revolution. There is no going back. And so updating our language and our vernacular to really point to words that are actually showing us, how do we leap forward? And in the leaping, we change shape. So there is also this real interest, like transformation. We're changing shape. It's also this word metamorphosis, which is also becoming such a cliche for this time. But how do we take these leaps forward? And in the act of leaping, we change who we are. We evolve into who we are becoming. And I think we're in an epidemic of comfort, where people are addicted to comfort because so many people have not had to face adversity. Living out of a backpack for 6 years of my life was also incredible training ground, because many of those nights I actually didn't know where I was sleeping that night. And so it was over and over again, this trust of flow. And that takes practice to cultivate. And so if this hasn't been, we've all gone through the pandemic. So it's like, even just thinking back, how did you react? How did you adapt? What moves did you make in response to the whole world shutting down and experiencing an unprecedented event? And so sometimes actually we look to, where are we already strong and how do we amplify that? So that's also a key aspect of coaching, right? When we work with people, it's like, where are your strengths and how do we leverage those strengths to help you move forward? And then it's also, there's a couple of other things here. It's like training yourself to sit with discomfort. And so those listening to this podcast, many people are probably sitting with medicines. And if you haven't had a bigger dose yet, a full journey, microdosing is that mini step. It's a way of saying, okay, I'm going to cultivate a relationship with trust with this plant ally to help me lean into the unknown. And I'm sure that you've seen this, Casey. I'm curious to hear your perspective on this. But after coaching, hundreds and hundreds of people on their microdosing journey, I noticed that so many people started out because they were like, I really just want to feel good. I want to feel better. I want to be more productive. But actually what happens is they're like, there's a period of, I really don't feel good. I feel this icky, bad feeling that I can't put my finger on, and it doesn't feel good. And that right there is exactly what I'm talking about. It's like we create space in our lives to slow down, and then all of these emotions, unprocessed emotions come up. So even just training yourself to sit with the discomfort of emotions is how you're training Transilience every single day. The discomfort of, okay, this doesn't feel good. I'm not really sure what this like icky feeling is under the surface, but I'm here. I'm here for it. I'm showing up for it. And a great metaphor that I use all the time in my programs is strong back, open front, open mind. So it's like strong back, soft heart, curious mind. So how do we show up for it with strength and courage, but also holding space for whatever wants to happen, and maybe sometimes really allowing ourselves to just fall apart for a minute, to unravel, to not have to hold it all together, but say, actually, I just need 20 minutes to just like wail on the floor and roll around a little bit and flail. And it doesn't have to be graceful, right? But allowing ourselves to actually start feeling in a very numbed out world is really the beginning process of moving back into flow with life. Because when we repress emotions, right, we're not flowing. So those are some initial suggestions. And another one is actually moving out of, I'm going to leap because I'm going to stick the landing, and moving into, I'm going to leap for the act of flying through the air, for the ride, for the journey. Actually, I don't care if I stick the landing or not. It would be really nice if I land it, but I'm going to learn something in the leap, and the leaping itself is forging me into who I am becoming. And when you leap in alignment with a clear vision that is inspiring you to take action, then I always trust that feeling. I always trust when my heart, body, and mind are aligned and I'm leaping in that direction, regardless of what happens, it's worth the courage to take the leap.
Thank you. So beautifully said. Yeah, we have seen that so many times. I can affirm that completely. And people it really are stepping into it. Moreover, the discomfort it's moved from, I don't think this is working for me, to this is absolutely working for me. Yes, absolutely. I would love to move on to one of your favorite passions, which is creativity, and how we can work with our creativity within our lives, our creative expression, and along with microdosing and earth medicine practice to move into those leaps in our lives.
Oh, this is such a great question, because like there's so much to unlearn and unpack around this word creativity. And so many people have such an old paradigm connotation to what creativity means. Oh, there's a very select few who are creative and I'm not one of them. Or there's creative people and then there's everyone else. And if you either have it or you don't have it. But that is not that's really limiting thinking, especially for these times of change that we're living in. So the first place I always start with people is really unpacking, like, when I say the word creativity, what immediately comes to mind? I've played this game on big stages with lots of people in the audience, and it always is so amazing to hear people shout things like, I'll say like, okay, I'll say creativity. What's the first thing you're going to just shout back the first thing at me? And I'll have people be like, not me. or like, and it's just things like that that are just so unfortunate because we are creative by definition of being alive. It's actually the essence of who we are. It's woven into the fabric of our DNA, and it's how we got here. And so just starting to empower people to know, okay, anytime you have an idea and you're translating that idea into reality, you're in an act of creation, of creativity. So we could take that step further when you get more advanced at the creative process. Hopefully that idea and the translation of that idea is novel, it's original, it has more benefit and has an applicability that benefits other people. Those are ways that we can actually start thinking about, like, what is the definition of creativity? One definition, and there's like over 20 definitions that I absolutely love. One of them is basically introducing an idea that's novel and original and useful for solving a problem at hand. And we're facing problems on a day by day basis. So that's really the first place I like to start with people, is just starting to flex the belief, the muscle in your mind that says, actually, everything I'm doing is creative. I'm creating my life, and starting to see your life as a work of art in that way, that you're the artist. We could say that you're the architect of your life, you're the architect, or you're the gardener. These metaphors are really helpful. A metaphor is a creative way to educate people, sticks with us. And so, yeah, it's such a big conversation, and I'm happy to go into like a deeper level of questioning around it. Another definition that I love of creativity is that it's just the defeat of habit by originality. And so when you start looking at that, and really, it's like a Zen koan that I think about almost every day. I'm like, it's the defeat of habit by originality. And what medicines and psychedelics actually help us do is that they're shaking that neural snow globe in a way that allows us to break free from habits. And that's actually what I spent most of my degree looking at in graduate school. Was under the surface, we know there's all this focus on how psychedelics help heal depression, PTSD, anxiety, and addiction. But actually, the same neurological underpinnings that are efficacious in the treatment of those big four are also the reasons that they help us become more creative. And I don't think many people would argue, do psychedelics make you more creative? Like, look around, look at the 60s after the Beatles started dropping acid, or the works of Aldous Huxley, or many of us who, I don't know if you know people like this in your life, but I see this all the time. People never play music, and then 3 months of sitting with ayahuasca, they're popping out songs. It's incredible because it clears that channel and allows us to reharmonize with that place of us that we are a creative instrument and we are playing with the universe, essentially. And so that was a big part of what I did in graduate school. And now there's a lot more people talking about this conversation, and it's moving from, do psychedelics make us creative? Because I think a lot of people can say intuitively, yes, they help with that, to the evolution of the conversation. Okay, how does that work? And pinning down psychedelics is really hard, and pinning down creativity is really hard. So when you start studying them together, it becomes this, sand kind of slipping between your fingers. And so it's a really interesting conversation with, how do we actually design studies to do that? And do we need science to validate what we intuitively know to be true? Or can we just teach curriculum based on our own experience, which is essentially what I've been doing?
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I've worked with so many creatives and artists throughout my career, people who are at the apex of their mastery and their art. And I've learned two really valuable things regarding creativity from them. One is they create for themselves, fundamentally. They create something that is an expression of themselves, and they come to understand, like, if other people appreciate it, that's just icing on the cake, right? But it always comes from themselves, even if it's just for them. That's true, pure creativity. The other thing I've learned from them is that creativity is an expression of ourselves and our spirit. Therefore, it is ever evolving. So that's another thing that I see people, when we talk about creativity, they find they're very stifled creatively because they get put inside a box of what they do. A painter paints, a singer sings. When in reality, an artist and a creative is constantly ever changing their expression and their medium over time. So I think lately we're kind of breaking out of these boxes. And I think psychedelics and microdosing, earth medicine practice can help us loosen those ties that are binding us to those fixed boxes and identities.
I love that you shared that. I love the insights of people who work with a lot of creatives. And I also want to add that if you're listening to this and you don't sing, paint, write poetry, dance, that is also like only associating creativity to those things, the aesthetic arts, is also, we're moving out of that paradigm too. And I found it so interesting that even the World Economic Forum, which is like, has their finger on the pulse of economic paradigm shifts, even they call creativity and creative thinking the number one most important skill set of our time. And I find that that's remarkable that we now live in this time. And if you think about it, I mean, there's so much I could say about this, but just briefly, in the age of artificial intelligence, if you only do one thing, you're going to be automated and replaced. If you only are really good at one thing, I mean, even the most creative artists are having a bit of a freak out right now with Midjourney. I mean, it's wild. But if you are diverse and leaning into the full expression of your innate intelligence in the face of artificial intelligence, clear communication, empathy, emotional intelligence, creative thinking skills, cultivating thought leadership, learning how to use your mind, your hands, your heart, your whole being to be in service to something greater. I feel like that's the evolution of where we're going, blending the boundaries of an artist paints. If you're an entrepreneur or even executive, a CEO listening to this, it's imperative to get on board with the narrative that you are creative. It's imperative for the success of your career life for the next decades to come. And I find that it's a welcome change in a way, and that every time you post on social media, it's a piece of art that you're expressing from your heart. And and that even in itself is a way of expressing creativity, making a meal, offering something to a friend, having a conversation. All of these are ways that we can enhance and step into, our creative expression, home decor, hanging plants, where you live, all of it. It's like, how can we choose to step on the path of embodied creativity as a way of life in service to what we're creating? Our legacy work is a work of art, and it is creativity in the highest form. And so I really want to emphasize that for people, because like it's time to get into this new paradigm of thinking about creativity.
Beautiful. Let's talk about another of your passions, which is leadership. So both you and I have worked with many, many leaders, many CEOs, and I love working with leaders because it has such a remarkable impact and ripple effect out. So I would love for you to touch on your work with leaders, developing leadership, and why it's so important for leaders to step into this work.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to extend what we've sort of already been pointing to. Right now, we are experiencing late stage capitalism. We're literally, I know the word paradigm is so cliche, but when you look at the definition of paradigm as a worldview or consensus, is starting to crumble. And we are entering into a new paradigm that's not clear. It's not defined. We don't know what that is. And I mean, back in the 80s, people were calling that era a VUCA world, a world marked by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And now we're living in a VUCA world on steroids. It's just like, and so the core trends that I'm noticing when I work with people is they're operating by the rules of the old game. And it actually takes a lot of courage to step into defining new rules to the game, because that makes you an outlier. But that is actually the definition of leadership. And so if you're not willing to be an outlier and to go against the grain, then it's really hard to actually lead and change conventional thinking towards a new way of perceiving and thinking, which is exactly what's needed right now. And one thing I'll name that is just sticking out like a sore thumb is that so many people operating in the old paradigm and the old rules of the game, they're afraid to slow down. They're afraid there's too much pressure to keep up with everything. And people are afraid to pause, to go within, to take time for them. I fall into this trap. I mean, we all experience this. And telling people that everything is on time, working with people who are like, it's okay, that actually, you can actually get more done. And that's one of the big shifts that's happening right now, is going from an 8-hour workday to a 4-hour workday, and it's so hard for people to step into that. But actually research shows that we have only 3 to 4 hours, 4 on the max, 3 hours of high cognitive functioning to do our best work. And so I revolve my day around that and step into, okay, I want to first and foremost create the life that fulfills me. And I want to lead and create from that place. And that's new paradigm thinking. Old paradigm as an entrepreneur, especially, was like, I'm going to pick a profitable business and then I'm going to sacrifice everything and revolve my entire life, my health and well-being, to be in service to the profit of this business. And that's an old way. And the new way is, I'm going to learn how to step into deep balance, embody balance in my life, and learn how to operate and walk on this earth and create in a more harmonic resonance with actually what feels good to a human-centric approach to living and creating as an extension of that place. And until we get there, I don't think we're going to see more and more people burn out. It's like, and that's that original question that you asked, is like, for people to start taking those steps rather than the rug being pulled out. Burnout is really scary. And that's the rug being pulled. And it's not like preventing you from reaching your highest achievement. It's actually showing you that you need to slow down to reharmonize with your body and your nervous system so that you can reach your highest achievement in this life, And so it's a whole different, like, everything gets flipped on its head. And I do think that medicines, there's a reason that there all these other names are coming out for psychedelics right now, like ecodelics, for example, and pathogens, these medicines that help us recalibrate our lives, and it's not a coincidence that I've been journeying with medicines for 25 years of my life. And I've been predominantly living outside for the last 20 years without walls and open air living, which some people in the mainstream completely lose their fucking mind thinking about that, which has been just such a process, but that's what it actually takes, is like, if we want to establish a new way of living, we have to be that and create from that place. And I work with clients, startup founders of multi-million-dollar companies who are working with medicines, and it's taking years to establish. We're coaching for years together to establish new rhythms, that this is not like, okay, we're going to go in, and do the thing, and in a month, it's all going to be different. It takes time to re-architect the psyche structure of your mind. It really takes time to do that. And there's a reason that change happens slowly. It's a built-in mechanisms to prevent us from completely having a break in reality. So we trust that process, and it takes a long time, but slow and steady, and it's the reframe, to sum it up, is like peak performance reframed into optimal alignment.
Beautiful. Absolutely. One thing that I think is so important to put out on the table right now is a lot of people stepping forward with these quote unquote alternative ways of living are inspiring the courage in other people, giving other people the permission to lean into their own path, that might be different than the norm. And so more of the quote unquote outliers are stepping into a new level of visibility and expression. And with that, comes enormous rewards, but also it comes with a price and a cost too. So I would love to give you the opportunity to talk about that, because most people see the rewards of visibility. Oh, you have so many followers and you get all these speaking opportunities and but and it's beautiful and it's all wonderful and we're grateful for all of it. But firsthand the flip side of that. So I would love for you to speak to that. It's something that's not often spoken to outright. And so for people to know when they are stepping into a higher level of power in their own lives, empowerment in their own lives, visibility, and holding up a vision for other people to step into their own vision, how you manage holding that.
Oh, I love this question. I'll just sum it up by saying it's like walking through the fire. And if you're not ready to walk through the fire, I consider the path of social media. We'll just talk about social media, for example, visibility, because that's like the biggest correlation to that right now. But the path of going for it on social media, and I'm not talking like, okay, I'm just like posting about my life. People who are like, okay, my intention is to grow an audience. I consider that to be akin to walking the medicine path. Because if you're in ceremony because of societal peer pressure, because you should be in ceremony, that fire is going to be a lot more painful and a lot hotter. If you're just like, everyone, I feel the pressure. I know a lot of people can relate to this because I hear this in clients all the time. I should be on social media. It's like the standard. I think that that's a very detrimental mindset to approach social media with. And that for me, and this is what my program Niche of One is all about. It's like, you have to feel a call in your bones that says, this is my dharma. This is what I'm showing up for. And if you don't feel that, I recommend not pursuing that path because it might destroy you. Even someone like Brene Brown, who I just have so much admiration and respect for. She has been such an inspiration in my life. When she did her TED Talk and it went viral and got millions of views, and she was like, oh my God, and then read the comments and they just were like tearing her apart. And she went into like, okay, I'm just going to shut my door and crawl into a dark hole for the next like years of my life. I mean, I've had quite a few videos go viral at this point, and it's been incredible to witness just the assumptions, the conclusions, the projections. There's like a whole sub comment thread on one of my things about how much I have in my 401k, where I'm like, I don't even have a 401k, which is just like, what does that have to do with anything right now? But you have to be ready for that. And so, and this isn't I've been at the helm of cancel culture before. I stepped out with a microdosing program many years ago, and people were flipping a lid about it. I taught my first microdosing program almost 10 years ago, and so that was early days in the coming out of the closet, and when I came out of the closet initially, like really publicly about 5 years ago on social media, I lost like 8,000 followers overnight. And which is not about the follower count or anything. It's just like, wow, people have a really hard time with wrapping their head around certain things. And I feel like I've always been pushing that boundary. And so there's this Charles Bukowski quote that says, if it doesn't come bursting out of you, don't do it. And that's how I feel about social media. If you don't feel like this is like my dharma, my path, like I have a message that I'm so compelled to share, if like it's bursting out of me, there's no, like it would take more effort to try to shunt this path than to actually walk through the fire with everything that comes with it and start training your nervous system now, because it's real out there. People are suffering and hurt people like to hurt people, and it's not personal. So how can you grow your roots so deep into the truth of who you are and stand in that so that you are so unfazed by the winds of criticism and also the winds of praise, because it's like people, and you don't do it. You mentioned earlier, it's like you don't create for other people. I'm not doing it for other people. I'm doing it as the expression of life force moving through me, but I'm not doing it because I'm trying to save anyone. I'm not doing it because I'm like, I need to help this person. I'm just like, this is the message that I'm getting from spirit. And this is the work that I'm doing in my solo practice. And it's so crystal clear. And I feel a lot more compelled, especially since I was invited by a council of Indigenous elders to go to Colombia about 2 years ago now to go meet with the Kogi elders and the Mamos. And the prophecy of the Kogis and the Mamos say that, we're moving through this portal, that the ending will fall into the new beginning in 2026, and there's all these other prophecies pointing to this time. And I feel it in my body and look at the division that's happening. And if you're taking a stand for something, there is no way that you can be in everyone's favor. So you just have to belong to yourself first and foremost. That's it. And belong to your connection with spirit and with the life force of creativity moving through you. And through the praise, I get a lot of praise too. It's probably 90% more praise and gratitude and thanks. But when the 10% comes in, it hurts. But through it all, so through the praise and the blame, I'm centered. This is not about doing it for accolades or any of it. But I know in my bones that I was meant to inspire millions of people. That was part of even when I was 5 years old, I knew that. And so I just trust that. I even had this moment where I turned to my really good friend, Tara Davina, who's a Vedic astrologer. And I was going through the whole cancel culture thing years ago. And I was like, I just want to crawl into a hole and die, and just completely go offline. And she knows my Vedic astrology chart very well. And she's like, there is nothing that you can do to prevent your visibility and success. Like, you are meant to be on stages. And so you can't do anything. The universe will keep finding a way to make it happen. And so I'm like, okay, that's interesting, So going with that current, and I feel like that's good advice for people in the social media game. Do it because you feel the call to do it, not because it's the norm and you should be doing it. Because that kind of visibility, if you grow, it's that root is not deep enough to weather that kind of storm that you will face.
Thank you so much. So I know everyone who is watching is dying to know your background, your physical background, the insects, the beautiful trees behind you. Yes, are going to be so curious. And if you're listening to this on an audio only, hop over to our website so you can check out the beautiful background that Laura has. Tell us about your lifestyle today. Where do you live? What is your vision? What are you cultivating there? I would love to hear more about that.
Thank you. Have you heard this term biophilic design?
Yes.
Okay, so biophilic design, for those who haven't heard this term before, it's a way, so my partner, my beloved's an architect and an interior designer. And it was sort of, we fell in love with our visions together of what we want to create. And so biophilic design is really looking at how do we integrate aspects and elements of nature into the environments and the spaces that we live in a way that's so deeply connected. From that place of connection, everything flourishes. Our emotional well-being, our spiritual well-being, our creativity. It's like creating a deeply harmonious relationship with our environment in a way that supports our thriving. And beyond just it being about me, my thriving, like can this do for me? It's really about, okay, how do we establish a new relationship with nature and our environment so that, when you live in a place like this, you're more inclined to tend to the earth. And when you're more inclined to tend to the earth, we make better choices. we make better consumer choices. And that it's a really tricky game to play because, no one can say they're completely sustainable. We still create trash, but we're always finding ways to minimize that. And it's hard and it breaks my heart. When you buy something and it's a plastic, it's like, where the fuck do we do with this now? Like you reorient around the concept of out, throwing it out. Where is out? Okay, it's not in my bubble, but it's still on this planet. And so, I have really taken biophilic design in terms of like interior design, architecture, and melding that with this concept of lifestyle design. And so I'm creating more of this concept of biophilic lifestyle design that is really looking at how do I create the scaffolding of my life and the environment that I'm in, which ties back to creativity. Because let's just back up for 1 second. There are ways that we can break up how we think about creativity. And when I explain this to people, it unjumbles their mind from thinking about like this massive thing of what creativity is. There's the 4 Ps that Mel Rhodes introduced in the 60s. I created 5 Ps, but it's the creative person, the creative process that person goes through, the creative product or the outcome. So you have a person with an idea, they go through a process, they create an outcome, the product. That's the 3rd P. And then we have a 4th P, which is creative place, the place that we find ourselves in. And this comes to a field of study called environmental psychology. How does the place that we find ourselves in influence creative cognition? And so this was actually something that I was very fascinated with in graduate school. And I dove really deep into that. There's some fantastic books about this. And so it's taking that. And then there's a 5th P that I added, creative practices. How do we practice ways to enhance our process? And so my entire life is really supported around my creative channel, around because that is my dharma. So it's like, yes, we can say that that's a very egocentric, selfish way, but my dharma is in service to planetary healing. So it's like my legacy is really important to me. It's what brings meaning and fulfillment and purpose in my life. And so my whole life, the way I construct it, all these different ways. So all of these little details so that I'm immersed in nature in something that is life force giving. I'm surrounded in all the time. And the structure of my day is also designed in service to my I don't want to say work, but it really is like my body of work that I'm creating here. So we live also around lots of beautiful waters and waterfalls. And so I take time to go replenish, to incubate, which is such a big part of the creative process. And it's a whole different way of thinking about how to show up as a creator in service to what we are meant to contribute through our lives.
I love it. Thank you so much. And I know those of you listening have a million more questions. What about the bugs? What about cooking? So I encourage you and invite you to go follow Laura online at Instagram. Live Free Laura D is the handle, correct? Where she answers a lot of those questions because she gets those questions a lot. So thank you so much. I would love to dive into microdosing specifically. So one of the questions I get frequently, I work with lots and lots of beginners reach out and they say, I really am curious. I'm really called to this, but I don't know which medicine to start with. Right. And I would love to hear your take on this. I know you've worked with many different medicines in a microdosing capacity. I would love to get your take on this, how you answer this question, but also in as much as you'd love to share any of your personal experience with the different medicines and their spirits.
Thank you. Yeah, I get this question a lot too. Generally, I feel like as a coach or as a mentor, a lot of what I'm actually doing with people that I work with and also through the programs that I teach is encouraging people to strengthen their own relationship to their intuition. So I don't ever step in and say, you should do this or you should do this, but more just like, what feels alive for you? What's calling you? And more just being this like buffer, this nest for them to get stronger with their own knowing. And yes, offer those places of like real practical advice and support because that's what they are asking for. But I think that a lot of times people in the psychedelic space, we forget that is really the essence of what we're trying to do. And I think the mind immediately goes to, oh, I should know the answer. And so I should try to figure this out for this person. And I think that that is a long-term detrimental approach to take with clients. And so I really encourage people, okay, and then once we pick, we decide, okay, they're going to work with that, to stick with that for a little bit through a protocol. And I kind of think of a protocol as like an arc of a ceremony, an opening, a middle, an end, and then integration in between. And I recommend less is more, not trying to pack a whole bunch of other things, combine it with other things, but just get to know the spirit of that medicine. So that's more for like newer people to the path. Psilocybin, LSD, those are two great places to start. So it's like one of those is most likely going to be, the answer for you on that path. Beyond that, I do have other people asking me about other medicines. And it really depends on where they're at in their journey, where they're at in their schedule as well, what they're going through. Is this something that they're like, okay, I'm going through a really big transition. I really need support. I have a lot of time to do my inner work right now. Or is this like, I'm still going to a 9-to-5 job and I really just need to improve my focus and productivity, where it's like, okay, that's a very different narrative. And it's so case by case. One thing I'll just presence is that it's really important to, of course, take like understanding of like cultural considerations into this. And even beyond cultural considerations, I think knowing that some medicines are at severe sustainability risk as a culture, I think it's our responsibility to be informed about some of those details and which medicines are very much at risk. And so when someone comes to me who's never done any work before and they're like, I want to microdose iboga, I'm like, what is that for? Like, why, what's calling you to that? Also, microdosing iboga without having a flood dose has limited benefits. And my point about bringing up iboga in particular is that it's severely at risk. It's going extinct in Gabon, and local people, the Gabonese people who have been working with that medicine for many, many, many years, don't have access to their own medicine because there are poachers going in and poaching that medicine. And it's associated to elephant poaching because the elephants go and eat that medicine. And it's like a black market trade. So it's like, be informed. Same with peyote. There's a lot of people in US alone, a lot of Native Americans who don't have enough access to their own medicine. And this is their religion. It's their sacred sacrament. So let's be, considerate in our journeys. And that's why I always recommend, going more in the direction of psilocybin, sacred mushrooms, or LSD. And then a big part of my practice has been working with Banisteriopsis caapi, which is the ayahuasca vine, which is also very nuanced in terms of there's a lot of opinions about cultural considerations for working with that medicine. There's cultural considerations, and also there's a lot more contraindications. So it's more of a dedication. And and it's tricky because there's always complexity. One person can just shut down and put a storyline, a narrative, onto this. And from my perspective, I don't think a plant discriminates against language, skin color, or what border you were born in. So, and that's really, even stepping into the fire to say that, because when you look at Banisteriopsis caapi, the ayahuasca vine, which there is also debates about the sustainability issue. I've talked to many people who say it's flourishing, many people who say it's depleting in certain areas. And there's no doubt about that. Ayahuasca tourism is real. For many years, I just grew my own medicine, made my own medicine, and worked with that. And so it was a closed loop cycle. I'm not buying it. I'm just tending to that plant myself. And when I look at, for example, Banisteriopsis caapi as an MAOI and its natural antidepressant effects, it's funny. I'm thinking of Brene Brown's quote, people are hard to hate up close. So move in. And so when people have this major judgment, you're a white person who is culturally appropriating. I'm like, I'm a person living on land, growing a plant and consuming that plant for myself. And I'm healing. And as a result of that healing, I'm changing my mind and I'm opening my heart and I'm contributing that flow of healing out to the world. And when I've worked with other people with Banisteriopsis caapi, because it's a natural antidepressant, I see people wake up to their lives. And so when people are having an immediate judgment of hate about something, zoom in, get up close, look at someone in the face who struggled with debilitating depression, watch them come alive, and then tell me if you think that that's right or wrong. And that's the approach that I take on these topics. There's not a one size fits all approach to this. There are many shades of gray. There are many ways to be moving and navigating in this life. And all I care about is that I'm moving in right relationship with who I am and with spirit. And that's it. And I can't say that I'm going to make everyone happy by saying that, or everyone's going to hate me by saying that. I'm just saying that's just the truth of that experience. After I got COVID the first time, I went into 3 months of the most darkest, debilitating depression, chronic fatigue, brain fog. I wanted to die. I'm not joking. I wanted to die. I was in Costa Rica. There was lockdown. There was no borders open. So I was here. And I was like, wow, I'm so grateful that I've had all of this training in my life to navigate something like this, because even with all of that training, I was like, I just don't even want to live anymore. And when the borders opened, I went back home and to Hawaii, where I had Vine medicine that I made and that I've microdosed with in the past. And within 14 days, I was a different person. And so it's like, what do you stand for? What do you stand for in your judgments? And so for me, it's like, I stand for being clear on, let's create space for medicines for the people who are using these medicines as a sacred sacrament, and not to infringe upon their use by us taking that. I think that that's a really important nuance here. And I think that there are also other ways that we can receive medicine, even though it's a part of different lineages, even though we're white in this lifetime, that it's still supportive for the healing of humanity to work with these medicines. Because every time I ask the medicine, I'm just like, medicine does not discriminate. They're not like, actually, this medicine is for that person that speaks that language, or for that person. It's just like, we're human. We bleed. We have hearts. And I'm in service also to, the regeneration of our planet. And so I think it's an all hands on deck situation, and that we need to move beyond this division and actually take a stand for healing and unity.
Thank you so much. So I love to ask my guests, and you have been in this quote unquote field longer than most, and have seen so much change in such a short amount of time, right? I'd love to ask you, what is your concern right now in the psychedelic space overall that kind of you have a caution around, or kind of keeps you up a little bit around as a whole?
Yeah, it's funny calling it a field. It only just recently became a field.
Right. Right.
And I like that you call it a field and not an industry, because I think the fact that it is an industry is my concern, and I'm not absolving myself from that equation. I run programs, you run programs. We live in a financial economic system. Last year I had a woman try to like create this whole online thing because she's like, you're a capitalist. And then the next day she's posting pottery on her Instagram feed. And I'm saying, okay, we need to educate you about like the definition of what capitalism is. Right now, we are in a financial monetary system. It's what we have that we're working with. People are trying to come up with new systems, but nobody, whether you call me a capitalist or not, nobody is not touching money right now. Nobody. However high horse you're sitting on, there's nobody that's saying, actually, you know what? I'm going to just live without that system. And so it's nuanced. And so, you know, I have a lot of compassion for everyone in the industry who's profiting and who's trying to figure out, because the intentions are good. You know, the intentions are good. The speed at which I think the movement has been moving it's like everyone's creating their own karma is also how I think about it. And so I can only do what I can do and model the best that I can and be in right relationship with myself and these medicines and what I'm in service to. And if I spend time where it's like, I have other people who try to police me and what I do. And I am just like, focus on yourself, because it's like, I'm just doing what is clear for me to do. And so I feel the same way about other people. And of course, the nuance is that like movement is happening very, very quickly. And I've had to, in the middle of an interview, shut an interview down on the podcast and not air episodes because I just couldn't get behind them, you know? And I was like, okay, damn, you were just listed top 50 people in the psychedelic space. You just had your first LSD journey last year, and you are in an accelerator, multi-million-dollar startup to become the referral force network for people, new people, to refer them to other places. I'm like, shallow roots. These are shallow roots. It takes time. I work with people. It's taken years, and I'm still working with chronic patterns from my upbringing, you know? And so I think like the changing of our mind takes time. And if we're still operating in this capitalistic, you know, late stage capitalist phase of our economic downfall, we're only presenting ideas to the extent that is held within a system, and it's no one's fault, you know? So for me to point a finger at the, you know, 50-year-old white man who like they line up who CEOs of ketamine clinics to speak on my podcast, the main reason I'm actually just like, I don't want to do this podcast anymore. You know, I'm not saying that they're bad people. It's the context of the situation that we're living in. And so a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding, open-minded discussions. This is what we need. Non-reactivity. I think more than medicine, people need meditation. You know, more than medicine is just like actually just like take 10 minutes a day to center. And it's hard when we're going really hard and we're in this, you know, the force of a different culture. So I don't have like a very concise answer for that, but it's like we just do the best that we can. Instead of pointing a finger, invite people into dialogue, stay open, stay curious, and more than anything, stay kind. Because if you're not staying kind, what's the point of any medicine journey you've ever done if you're not staying kind?
Thank you so much. I mean, you and I could do an entire episode series, I think, on this topic alone. But I mean, this is up in my life, and I, like you, I mentor and coach a lot of other healing artists and guides in this space. And particularly when you're newer, you know, you and I have both been at our work in our field for a very long time. And so we are so focused on our work. We have a body of work to rest upon. When you are making the brave step of stepping out of a corporate job that is salaried, gives you health benefits, is quote unquote safe, to leave that and step into a role that is more meaningful to your heart, to be of service to the planet, that's a very tender and vulnerable time. And when people are coming at you, shaming you, devaluing you, saying you don't have the authority to be doing something, that's when I wake up to that, because they don't have that body of work to rest on, that focus on the work. And so to your point, I probably at this point, 3 to 5 times every week, I have a former Wall Street person, a former tech person wanting to scale me. They want to scale. And, and it's interesting. It's always an interesting conversation because the problem is they're trying to layer these Wall Street banking, MBA, capitalistic operations and incentives onto a field that it doesn't work. We've already seen in the last 3 years, how many of these companies that are built for speed and efficiency and to scale quickly, what happens when you don't focus on the deep roots. And so it's especially problematic, I think, when you have people trying to do things differently.
Yeah.
And you have people coming at you, shaming you for making money and doing things. Well, it's like, well, we can't do things differently. We can't show people how to do things a different, more sustainable way if we're made to feel small and afraid and disempowered from actualizing that. So thank you. I really appreciate you speaking so powerfully to this, because I do think it's up for big change right now. And people just don't know what to make of it yet and see, I feel like we operate so much, especially in the healing fields in our modern lifetime, is we focus on the spoke. We don't focus on the wheel. We focus on the spoke. And so people don't realize, oftentimes I see people criticizing people that are trying to do good work. I know them, they're well-intentioned, heart-centered people, so devoted to this work in this lifetime. But then people are complaining that it's a business. They're charging money. It's like, and until you've grown a business and you have, a lot of these people, you're trying to touch people's lives, and help and support people on the planet. That's where it's coming from. But we only see the spoke, right? We don't see that you have to invest in the wheel. And so when we create that self-sustaining loop where money, to me, a woman who's been very, very powerful in my life is Lynn Twist and the work of Lynn Twist.
I'm reading Golden Money, and Tara, who I mentioned, is mentoring with her. Yes, I love Lynn Twist. Absolutely. So happy about it.
She's just so wonderful. And she's been beating this drum for many, many, many years.
Yes.
And yes. And so everyone in my program reads her book, because I think fundamentally it shifts everything when we reconceive money as money, right?
Yeah.
And the material framework that we have money, and change our framing of money to creative resourcing.
Yeah.
And ask yourself, who putting money in more money in the hands of this person, what are they going to do with it? They're just going to amplify who they already are. Right?
Yes.
So thank you. Yeah. This is such an important topic.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm so happy that you brought this up. Do we have a few more minutes?
Go for it. Absolutely.
It's so interesting because we don't see how things are. We see how we are, right? We perceive as a reflection of ourselves. So this is a great invitation. It's like, if you poo-poo even the word business, it's like, actually, I see business as my sacred vessel, the container, the launch pad for my greatest life's work. So it's like, that's how I relate to it. I see money coming in. It's like, P.S. I don't have a 401k to the 5,000 people who've asked me on, Instagram. Because that's not what is valuable to me. What's valuable is taking that money and reforesting this land that we're on. That's what I find valuable. And this is again where it comes so nuanced. Like, there are a lot of people who are like, you're a white woman taking land away from people in Costa Rica. And it's tricky. And I sit with this a lot, actually. And the local people who sold our land literally made almost like 100x profit on this land. And so they're, in the capitalist reality, but they're also still in the Roundup phase, using Roundup and chemicals. And part of our mission for this land project is that we're reforesting it because they clear cut it, all of it for the cattle. And when having cattle, it's like pollutes the water. So right now I'm like stewarding these 2 kilometers of water around this land as like a sacred responsibility to keep this land clean and play my part, because this sacred waterhead feeds a lot of people here. And so it's like, for me, I'm at this point in my life where it's like, I'm on Team Gaia. I am on like, what do we do to help support the earth, but also have to acknowledge a lot of the nuance of being a Westerner in another culture. And when people say, you don't belong there, I'm like, wow, do you say that to immigrants who come to the US too? Oh my God. Like, do you say that to anyone who's moved from a different country to another part of a fictitious border that we've created through a story? Like, and so it's really tricky. And this is such a hot button topic. But when we talk about like going back a step, about like people in the psychedelic space, if you think about it, a lot of people who are attracted to work with medicine have a lot of trauma and a lot of healing work to do. Right. And when that work doesn't we're not fully focused on our work, we just amplify more trauma. Right. So I think we're in this phase of the psychedelic movement where, because there's so many new people who are at that moment where they're like, oh my God, this is incredible. I see the potential. I want to totally like launch businesses around it. But they're still in the early phases of like healing of real trauma. There's like this, like, just amplification of trauma inflicted on more people, where I'm just like, oh my goodness. So I think we're going to get out of that phase in the decades to come. But I do think that that is a part of the phase that we're going through right now, where it's like, we just need to do our own work. And when I see all of these people trying to police everyone else, it's just like too much time looking at other people and not enough time listening to your divine guidance. And that's where I'll try to spend more time. It's just like, I try to not pay attention. I try to just do me and sit with my medicines in a way that is in alignment with my practice, so that I just keep getting that guidance. What is my path here? What is my divine assignment? And am I in alignment with it? And if I'm not in alignment with it, how do I refine so that I can keep, on this path and serve in a good way? And so there's so much nuance. We can't speak to all the nuance. So someone listening to this are going to be like, attack me from one angle that I didn't speak about, but it's like, hey, we can't speak to all of the nuance. So just listen to your own intuition, like softening those hardened places in our hearts that were so defensive and reactive, and like putting down those barriers and becoming more human in the process. Because I think that is connecting to our shared humanity is what is going to get us through more than psychedelics, more than anything, is actually building a bridge that's saying, actually, we're all on Mother Earth, and this ship is like not going well right now. So like, what are we doing to help support this in a good way?
Team Gaia. I love it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I would love, in closing, I love to ask all of my guests to suspend reality completely. And if you could have your highest vision come to pass, no obstacles, no gatekeeping, what have you, come to pass, how do you envision earth medicines, plant medicines coming into society in this moment in its highest potential?
That's a great question. I hope everyone's leaning into their imagination. If medicine, even if not everyone actually ingested medicine, but there were enough people that are connected to enough other people who are working with medicine, like the mycelium network, like a node of a person who can wake up to greater possibility in their lives, then that can have a big rippling effect. I don't think that these medicines are for everyone. This path is not for everyone. Not every path is for everyone. Just like I said with social media, it's like, we have to get more clear on like, what is mine to do? And one of my favorite episodes that I did on the Psychedelic Leadership podcast was with Chris Beisch, who had 73 high dose LSD journeys. And he I feel a deep kinship with him because there are very few people who are dedicating their lives to work with medicine and then create curriculum that supports humanity. Very few people. So I was like, wow, I've been alone for so long, and you are also in this path of doing that. And he said something on that episode that when I re-listened to the episode to edit it, I cried. I bawled the whole time listening to it because I was just so moved by it. And he said, I said, what do we have to do to help us through this time of change? Who do we have to become? And he said, it's not about that. It's just, do you have the courage to do what is yours to do? And I was just like, damn, and that's it. And that's what comes back to that Charles Bukowski quote. It's like, if it's not coming bursting out of you, don't do it. This is the time to realign with what is mine to do, and then have the courage to lead from that place. And without shaming anyone else or, it's like, just allow people the space to do what is theirs to do without judging them for it. And just encouraging that movement, that motion. And I never shared one of the essence of the vision that is so alive in my heart and mind for this land is that we're creating these really beautiful spaces for people who are really at a high level in their mastery, who are working with medicines to also birth their life work in the way that I've been doing for many years of my life. People who are writing their book, who are launching the thing, and coming to stay for us in these beautiful places, connected to nature, where they're nourishing their bodies in a good way and able to sit with medicine pretty regularly and support them in birthing their legacy of love. And 3 to 6 month containers, where it's like you're coming because you're on your path, your dharma, your service, and you're creating to elevate. And we want to create the environment to help support the fruition of people at that level who are really have a deeper solo practice with medicine, who are birthing something that is really helping elevate and contribute to a more harmonious chapter of human history. And so I'm just doing what's mine to do. That vision is alive in my heart, and it inspires me. It compels me. It's what motivates me every day. If you think about what inspiration is, inspiritedness, it's free energy propelling you towards the thing that you feel passionate about. And so tuning to that in our own lives, think about the last time you were inspired by something. How did you feel? What was inspiring you? What did you do with all of that energy that the spirit of inspiration just infused you with? And if you can recalibrate more of your life to follow that, that's how you step into service. That's how you follow that guidance to be of service, because it feels good and it's contributing something. So we're not doing it because we're a martyr. We're doing it because actually this is what feels good. This is what lifts me up. This is what makes my soul come alive. Is bursting out of me. And so I'm just doing what's mine to do and training my nervous system to be kind and to, navigate all the ins and outs of visibility and praise and blame by staying true to who I am. And that's all I can do.
Gorgeous. Thank you.
And it's a not easy path sometimes.
Beautiful. Thank you so, so much for being with all of us today. I really appreciate you so much. And I'd love to give you a moment to share anything you have upcoming. How can people support your work? How can they find you? All those good things.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I always love talking to you too. And I could just keep going. I'd love to actually just keep talking and now reverse all those questions and get your opinion on everything we just shared. Because I think you're also so well spoken and articulate, and you come with so much heart in the work that you do. And I really see all the ways that you're showing up too. So just thank you too for all the work that you do. And just seeing you rocking it really makes me happy. So I am just at the tail end of my 6-month facilitator training program, training psychedelic coaches. And that was also a really big gap in the space, training more coaches who are psychedelic informed, who are working with other people who are either journeying with them, not necessarily facilitating their journey, but clients who are really doing a lot of medicine work and needing help in the integration process in that way so that they're moving more into alignment with who they're becoming, the vision of who they're stepping into. And I'm going to run that again next September. So I'm going to run another cohort, but I just opened enrollment for another program called Niche of One, Become Your Niche of One. And it's really for people who feel this call, like I mentioned earlier, for magnetizing an audience that they genuinely want to build a relationship with in a way that builds a movement, inspires meaningful change. And so this is not for everyone. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's a training program to help people who maybe have a lot of different interests and they're trying to connect the dots of all of their diversity of passions into a concise offering, how to get clear on their core message. It's a little more of the business oriented program. And it's an evolution of my previous program, Your Message is Your Medicine, that was just for medicine women entrepreneurs. But now I'm really opening it up to everyone. And I'm really excited about this program because we really are looking at what are the changes that are happening right now and what windows of opportunity are opening up for people like us, because there's never been a better time to actually build a personal brand that is modeling a new way of living. There's never been a better time to do that. And so this is the time. And if you really know what to look for and understand a framework, then there's a huge opportunity for people. And again, it's not for the fame or the success or the money. You do it because this is your path. So I'm really excited about that. And all the details for that program are at lauradawn.co/niche of one.
Thank you so much, Laura. And everybody, please do follow Live Free, Laura D, on Instagram. Endlessly inspiring. Love it. And yeah, thank you so much again, Laura, for being here and the vision that you're holding for all of us.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening. We'll look forward to seeing you back here in just a couple weeks. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Microdosing for Healing podcast. Are you ready to take the next step? Please visit us at microdosingforhealing.com to access our free Microdosing 101 workshop. In it, you'll learn more about our diverse community, our supportive group programs, and discover if earth medicine practice might be right for you. See you in the next episode.